Religious groups have joined forces with the Education Department to root out Satanism in Gauteng schools. This follows the murder of a West Rand schoolgirl allegedly by fellow pupils who are believed to be involved in the practice. We're joined by clinical psychologist Dr Ian Opperman. Thanks very much for coming in this evening, Doctor. Why do children enter into this kind of cult behaviour?
You know, at a time in one's life, you become adolescent. Adolescents are renowned for their search for meaning and a sense of often rebelling against what is the norms of society at that time, and they rebel and they want to find some of their own truth. And often Satanism is seen, not always accurately, as an antithesis to normal Christianity, for instance, you know, as the opposite of that. So it's an ideal place of rebellion. So a lot of rebellion centers around religion and wants a religious identity then.
Does it inculcate a sense of belonging as well, especially it being so ritualistic in its nature?
Most certainly, because if they don't find belonging, especially your splinter adolescent that doesn't find a sense of belonging with the main group, you know, the jocks or the rugby players or the soccer players, they have to find some place of belonging. If they then get invited into a group like that, they find an absolute sense of belonging there and a sense of purpose then for themselves.
But that also talks about a situation in our schools where certain children are the popular crowd and other children are alienated, doesn't it?
That's correct. That's certainly, most certainly. And in America, thank God we haven't had it in South Africa, but in America you've seen these kids who've taken guns to schools and then killed some of their classmates and some of their school teachers and so on. So it certainly it speaks to that alienation, that alienated group that does not always fit in and needs a sense of purpose and identity.
Dr Opperman, how much of an issue are a lack of supervision and parental input in our country?
I think it's a huge issue. You know, I think the capitalism is a phenomenal system, but since capitalism is there, we have two working parents. In South Africa, we're renowned for migrant labor, with fathers often working on mines or far away from home. You know, single income is often not enough, so often you have working mothers and fathers, dual working parents. So children come home from early ages to an empty house. And of course, in teenagers, they start searching for friends and looking for somewhere else. And if a parent is there and notices what your child is up to, and they're starting to do strange behavior or withdrawing themselves, becoming terribly depressed or starting with drug abuse or whatever, the parent will notice it and be proactive in their response. Often by the time parents notice these days, it's reactive. When the police phone you and say your child is in jail because they've burned another child or whatever the case might be, you know, and that's too late, too little too late.
Now, you mentioned issues like drug abuse and so on. What are the warning signs parents should look out for when it comes to issues of children joining cults?
You know, different cults, of course, have different paraphernalia or things. So Satanism, it's easier because people are aware of it. You know, the goat's horns, the pentagrams, you know, even some of the games that children play. You know, and sometimes it's really hard to identify because if a child goes through a goth stage, you know, goth could very easily be mistaken for Satanism, for instance. So it's not always as easy. And if a child is very clever at hiding there's satanic paraphernalia, like the Satanic Bible, for instance, not like make it lie around or let stuff lie around, and do it on the internet or iPad with a password where parents can't have access to necessarily. They will practice it under their parents' noses without them knowing.
Well, you brought me to my next question about access to the internet and the increased media our children are bombarded with. Now, how much of an influence is that on young lives right now in encouraging this kind of
It's huge.
conduct?
And the research shows very clearly that since the internet, you know, before Satanism appeared to have been mostly an American, a Western phenomena, and since the internet and free access of information, children all over the world can have access now to it, can read up on it. If they find a sense of rebellion against society, they can find something that's anti-society, and they see Satanism as that, which is, like I said, not always accurate, and they then certainly find a sense of identity through that.
Thanks very much for talking to us this evening, Dr.